Welcome back to the rebuild series. Previously we looked at going straight rebuild, and we'd also looked at adding cantrips to the deck, right? That's what we did last time, was the cantrips, and that gives you some weird small amount of deck control because you can choose whether to play it before or after the rebuild depending on what's left in your draw deck if you're keeping track of that. Um, Obviously, it's usually just play the rebuild first and then play the cantrip, and it's not a huge difference to have the cantrips rather than the rebuilds, but it can be nice sometimes, especially at a certain point in the game. Anyway, this time I want to look at a little bit more heavy duty of the cycling or deck sifting or non-draw deck control. Typically, that can be kind of important for rebuild. And today we're going to look at dungeon and warehouse, which are pretty decent enablers for a rebuild strategy. Now, whether you open silver or and then get a warehouse on your next three, same thing with dungeon, or whether you go silver warehouse and then get a silver on your next three, there's a lot of pros and cons for either side. I've done a lot of trying to work out which one's better and which one's not, and it's still not clear to me. I think they're roughly close. Obviously, there's some really good and really bad cases either way. But for today, we're just going to open silver, kind of sidestep the question. We're going to start with warehouse and move into dungeon later. It's possible that it's also the answer is different between the two. Uh, whether dungeon, whether you have dungeon or whether you have warehouse, whether you go for silver warehouse and silver dungeon silver or vice versa or something. I'm not sure. But that's not really the question that we're trying to answer here. We're just trying to see how well warehouse and dungeon help things. And again, here I'm not 100% sure whether I should take another warehouse or a silver, but I think I want the third silver. And obviously I'm going to take my second rebuild. Now I'm not going to take any more silvers, and I'm just going to take warehouses. And okay, so here we want to hit all of our cards and make it as close back to the shuffle as possible. If we name duchy and then duchy again, there's a pretty good chance that we will end up skipping our duchy, or if we name duchy and then province, there's a very good chance we'll skip our duchy on our first two plays of rebuild, and then we'll trigger a shuffle that we don't want to trigger. So we want to name province every time. And so yeah, here you see we would have skipped this duchy, and we would have shuffled then back in, and that is not what we want to do. So that's a really important point. Now we're going to take another warehouse. I'm going to play this warehouse, and now we can name province. Okay, so two rebuilds down there and one that I just played, meaning these four cards are going to have a rebuild, and they're not going to have a warehouse because these warehouses are here. So they're going to have, looks like, 3 coppers. Okay, so the question between rebuild and duchy here is kind of interesting. I think I'm just going to take the duchy at this point, but obviously it's going to depend a little bit on what you see. Oh, there was a green card in there. Okay, so there I should have thought a little bit more before blindly naming province, but it ends up working out okay. There's only one duchy in here, and so yeah, I'm not sure which way is actually better, but end there. And now there is a duchy in here, and there are 3 provinces. So if I name province, then I'm going to get through to my duchy, and then I'm going to look for a next province. If I name estate, I might hit province first, in which case then I hit. I think I skip through more if I name province first here. And now all of my green cards are in the trash. I could consider not playing this rebuild, but I think usually you're going to want to. Okay, so because of what I revealed there, we know that there are no more warehouses in these last 7 cards, but there is 1 rebuild in these 7 cards. I think it's probably time. Again, it's going to depend on the game situation, but you get an estate here. Turn 12, we basically have more or less half the VP. And probably mill province is the best way to go. We can buy another estate. and we can end the game here. So pretty fast, right? Turn 12, we had an effective win. Turn 14, we actually ended it. Let's do it maybe one more time, maybe a little bit faster with warehouse, and then we'll do one or two with dungeon. So silver, silver, warehouse, rebuild. We would use traveling fair there normally. Hold on. I just blindly played this warehouse, which is again, similarly not something that we actually want to do, as this gives us more control. Again, I think we want the third silver probably. We've skipped one of our silvers, so we know these cards are actually, there's one copper that we've discarded and 3 coppers in hand. So actually it's silver. We're going to hit 5 again next turn anyway, which is a somewhat strong consideration for getting warehouse here instead. I think I'm going to do that. So now we play rebuild. We know that we've seen our estate last shuffle, so if we're being mirrored, we need to hit estate into duchy here. Since we're not being mirrored, actually with the warehouse, well, let's still do it this way. And now let's not play this warehouse, trigger a bad shuffle, and let's just take a third silver here. Now we can get our third rebuild. Name province, of course. State into duchy. And yeah, I think again I don't want to trigger this shuffle. Take a third warehouse now. Take a fourth warehouse now. And name province. State goes into duchy. Go duchy into province. And now this would be a terrible shuffle to trigger. So I'm actually not going to play this rebuild. Now we can mill a couple provinces. This is obviously a much slower draw as it's turned out. I'm going to go ahead and buy an estate here. And depending on where you are, we can either turn it into duchy and work it up the line, or we could have just tried to end the game. Again, this is a bad shuffle to trigger, but I think at this point it was worth it, and it worked out okay. Now we can mill the last couple provinces. So obviously there's a lot of luck to the draws, as there always is. This is turn 15, 4 provinces and a duchy, not the greatest. Now we'll try it with dungeon. We're going to see a similar story, I think. And another silver. Wait, this isn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to go silver, silver. Well, I guess we'll be able to see this opening here. This is a good case for the dungeon. In fact, this is a really good case for the dungeon play. Now we want a third silver. We have 1 duchy, 2 estates, I think. Let me make sure. Yep. So we can turn estate into duchy, and there's a duchy in here. And okay, this is good. Now we take our next dungeon. I'm going to zoom all the way. And we'll just keep taking dungeons at this point, I think. So we have 2 provinces and a duchy. Let's check the trash and make sure. Yep, 2 provinces and a duchy. Again, we're going to trigger this shuffle, and we're actually going to take an estate here, I think, which is, again, quite unusual to do, but in this case I think makes sense. And now we can get our 3rd rebuild, finally. And probably 3 rebuilds is enough in this case. So, okay, where are we? We have 4 provinces, I believe. 5 duchies in the trash. Yeah, so, oh no, we have 5 provinces. Okay, well, anyway, we just need to mill one is the important point. And it's close enough to the end of the game that we can get a state here. And we'll mill province. And we'll buy a duchy here because we're going to see the rebuild here. And actually, because we only have 1 estate, we can keep this in hand and make sure that we nail the duchy and buy an estate. Okay, let's do it one more time with dungeon. Silver, silver, our preferred opening here. Rebuild. Double rebuilds. This is the best case scenario, is that you really delay the dungeon because you've hit rebuild so many times. Here we want to skip as much as possible, so let's do that. And because we already have 3 rebuilds, pretty inclined to take dungeon. And could take another dungeon here, could take a silver. I think I'm going to take the dungeon. Again, 3 rebuilds is encouraging me to make this kind of play. Yeah, all of our estates are in the trash, so and we're much less concerned about the bad shuffles with this many dungeons, so that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, it's an interesting call here whether to play the rebuild or to play the dungeon or keep the copper to hit 5. But I think we're going to do it this way. And let's buy an estate, I guess, because we're never hitting 5 again, probably. Just as I say that, we of course hit 5 again. Take a dungeon, I guess. Looking for rebuilds here, don't get to 1. Now we'll take a state. Gonna name that estate here. Buy another estate. And finish the game out. So the warehouse and the dungeon, as you see, they have some good nut draws. Obviously, you got to tailor what you're doing to what your opponent's doing, but they do speed you up a little bit and a little bit more than your just cantrips. But you do have to worry that you still need to make sure you get enough economy because you really still want to get 3-4 rebuilds, and you don't want to rely too much on the dungeons and stuff, particularly if you need to be getting more than just the 4 provinces in terms of points. But that's it for this installment in the rebuild series, And no, this one was a little bit long. I guess it's about the same length. But we'll see you again next time for the next video.